The ominous Tower of London is not only the most haunted place in London, but it's also considered to be one of the most terrifying destinations in the world. Said to house thousands of ghosts from those who've died on the property, you would think there wouldn't be any place scarier than this. But you might just be wrong. Welcome back everyone, my name is Kennedy, and today we are talking about one of my favorite things in the world, creepy and haunted historical locations. So let's dive right in. These are the top 10 cursed historical places scarier than the Tower of London. Starting us off at number 10, Leap Castle. The construction of Leap Castle is a subject of significant debate, either occurring in the 13th or the 16th century, but our story begins when the O'Carrolls came to live there. Almost immediately they developed a reputation for frequently killing and imprisoning rivals, and many of the ghosts today are believed to have been former prisoners of the clan. The Red Lady, for instance, is said to be a former prisoner who fell pregnant at the hands of one of the clan members. But allegedly, the man who put her in her situation killed the little one, and thus the mother took her own life in distress. It's said she wanders the halls still holding the weapon she used, and some believe that if you get on her bad side, she may just use it on you as well. There's also said to be a mysterious spirit named the Elemental, who is a clan member that died of leprosy and leaves behind a nauseating odor. And most notably, one of the clan members attacked his own brother while he was conducting mass. And ever since, the chapel has been known as the Bloody Chapel, haunted by the slain priest. However, the scariest part of the Bloody Chapel is the oubliette. During renovations in the 1900s, workers discovered the oubliette, and when they opened it, they found numerous human skeletons stacked on wooden spikes at the bottom of the shaft. There were so many remains that it required 3 cartloads to get rid of them, and that's not even a fraction of the terrifying entities that are said to haunt this historic site. Moving on to number 9, Laperall House. Built in 1920, the historic Laperall House is said to be one of the most haunted buildings in all of Baguio City. Once the home of the Laperall family, at the height of World War II, terror in the form of Imperial Japanese soldiers overtook the house, taking out the family along with it. It's said during this time as a garrison, many soldiers and civilians alike were killed, and many believe that every last one stays haunting its halls today. However, it's not only ghosts from the war that are said to haunt its halls, but a few of the residents who lived there afterwards as well. Among them is a girl who is said to have been run over by a car, and her nanny who stares out the window mourning the loss. Since then, the estate has served a few purposes, most famously as a museum, while nowadays it apparently serves as a restaurant. However, make no mistake, you are sure to see haunted figures roaming around. Whether it's the creepy young girl and nanny or the sound of the blood-curdling screams of soldiers, the Laperall House is one terrifying location. Next up at number 8, the Ursuline Convent. In the 1700s, this convent was run by nuns and housed casket girls. Now, casket girls were young women who had come from France to marry colonists and got their name from the casket-shaped boxes containing their belongings they were holding when they arrived. But after their arrival, strange things started happening. The girls started disappearing, and locals declared them to be vampires out to kill them. Now, the 3rd floor had been where they were residing in the convent, but to protect the nuns and other citizens of the town, it was decided the doors would be sealed shut with nails blessed by the Pope, and no one ever dared set foot on the floor again. That was until 1978, when 2 paranormal investigators wanted some answers to the legend and camped out in front of the convent. As the legend goes, the 2 dozed off during their investigation, and the next morning, the doors that were previously nailed shut had wiggled loose, and the investigators were found dead, torn open and drained of their blood. Moving on to number 7, Suzugomori. Established in 1651, Suzugomori operated as one of the largest execution grounds for 220 years. During this time, it's estimated nearly 100,000 people were killed by the military, most commonly by being beheaded, although they did have some even more gruesome ways to get the job done that drew attention of the town. After the executioner took their big swing, they would let the head of the condemned fall to the ground and leave it there until it was drained of all its blood. From there, it was washed before being put on display for the whole city to see, kind of like a sick warning of what could happen to you if you stepped out of line. Today, it's littered with Buddhist monuments to try and keep the countless souls at bay, but they are no match for the entities that haunt the grounds. Some say that if you take a picture of the well they used to clean the decapitated heads, that the ghosts will show themselves. Just be careful, as they're also known to scream. Moving on to number 6. Point Lookout Lighthouse. Reputed to be America's most haunted lighthouse, much of the notoriety surrounding the Point Lookout Light stems from what happened here during the Civil War. Following the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863, a Union prison camp was established north of this very lighthouse that at one point is said to have housed as many as 20,000 Confederate prisoners of war. Now, out of these 20,000, nearly 4,000 prisoners died due to harsh conditions, limited food rations, and poor shelter from the elements, and their bodies were buried on the site. But although it is no longer open to the public, there have been countless reports of trespassers seeing the ghostly apparitions of Confederate soldiers, and according to reports, the spirits are very angry, seeking out revenge on those who imprisoned them. So, unless you're looking to be terrorized by an angry Confederate soldier, which I have no clue why you'd be looking for that anyways, then this is probably not the best place to pay a visit. Next up at number 5, Poveglia Island. It might be a small dot of land in the Venice Lagoon, but this island is far from a picture-perfect Italian destination. After already losing roughly half of the Venetian population to the Black Death in 1347, by the 1400s, the people of Venice discovered the concept of quarantine and felt that they'd hit a gold mine. So by the time the next outbreaks occurred, they started sending over anyone with even the mildest symptoms to nearby islands, most famously Poveglia Island. The infected populace was forced to remain quarantined on the island for 40 days. But without any actual cure available, pretty much everyone still died, and so it became a mass grave site, incinerating most of the dead bodies so as not to let the disease spread. Later in the 20th century, it became a mental institution, and its reputation only got worse. Allegedly, the experiments performed on the patients were so unethical and cruel that the doctor responsible took his own life to try and escape the crimes he had committed. Others think he was haunted by the thousands of ghosts already haunting the island and ended his life to escape their torments, but either way, it is riddled with terrifying spirits and definitely a scary place to visit. Moving on to number 4. Sarah Winchester's mansion. As the story goes, in 1881, Sarah lost her husband to tuberculosis, and in her grief sought out a spiritualist in hopes they could help her contact her husband to help overcome this tragedy. But instead of getting the solace and closure she was looking for, she received an ominous warning that sent her off the deep end. You see, her late husband's family had created the notorious Winchester rifle. That became known as the gun that won the West, which meant that thousands had died due to their creation of that weapon. So when they reached her late husband in the beyond, he warned Sarah that all their lives' tragedies were a result of the blood money earned from the evil weapon. Next, he explained that spirits were coming after her with a vengeance, and she needed to build a home for herself to protect against them. But there was one catch. She could never stop building. If she stopped construction, she would die. Sarah took this omen incredibly seriously and began constructing on her property immediately, turning her mansion into a topsy-turvy maze, believing it would confuse any spirits who tried to enter and harm her. There are staircases that lead to nowhere, trapdoors, skylights on the floor, doors that open to walls, and even a door that opens to a 2-story drop. With all that, it's said that ghosts really did get trapped inside, and now, unable to leave, get madder and madder with each passing day. And many have reported seeing apparitions, voices, and footsteps while visiting. Moving on to our number 3, Lalaurie Mansion. One of the most infamous buildings in all of Louisiana, Lalaurie Mansion was once home to the cruel and evil Madame Delphine Lalaurie, who even in her time was regarded as a monster and was known to have her slaves taken from her regularly due to their outrageous mistreatment. In 1834, a fire broke out in her mansion, and when police and fire marshals arrived at the site, they found one of her slaves chained to the stove, claiming to have started the fire to try and take her own life to escape the cruelty. Next, they found another 7 victims in her attic, suspended from the ceiling, mutilated and barely alive, stating to have been imprisoned here for months. Once news broke out of her cruelties, citizens attacked the house and demolished everything they could. While the original building no longer stands, the grounds it stood on are some of the most haunted in all of Louisiana, as it is believed nearly 100 people lost their lives under Madame Delphine's cruel torment. Visitors have reported feeling the violent touches of ghostly hands, and a medium that visited stated that a very dark demonic entity resides within the building's walls. Moving on to number 2, Kuldara. Once upon a time, the village of Kuldara was booming with residents, but these days it's considered as one of the most haunted locations in India. And of course, just like any good ghost town, it's got a good ghost story to match. According to the legend, Kuldara village was once home to a very wealthy community of people called the Palival Brahmins. However, among them was also a minister and ruler named Salim Singh. Now, legend has it that Singh had fallen in love with one of the villagers' daughters, but let's just say she wasn't exactly an appropriate choice as far as the Palivals were concerned. This pushback didn't seem to deter the ruler, who then told his guards to fetch her at once from the village using any force necessary. But when the guards arrived at the village, the Palival convinced them to return in the morning and that they would hand over the girl then. However, when the guards returned in the morning, the entire village was gone. It said the village escaped in the night, leaving nothing behind but a curse, and it has remained abandoned ever since. Today it's said to be haunted by the ghost of the evil sultan, and some locals even claim that merely stepping on the property can curse you for eternity. And last up in our number 1 spot, Obvodny Canal. Officially the longest artificial canal in St. Petersburg, the Obvodny Canal once served as the southern border to the city. While today it no longer serves such a purpose, it is still a huge landmark, but not necessarily for good reason. Tragically, despite not being very deep, this location happens to be a place where many have taken their own lives. The phenomenon began as far back as construction, when workers who were digging the grounds for the canal would routinely complain of debilitating headaches or suddenly become ill with previously non-existent health conditions. Workers even began turning violent towards each other, seemingly out of nowhere. But still, they were ordered to finish construction no matter what. Then in the 1920s, granite tombs were discovered when the government began building a road beside the canal. Archaeologists were not permitted to study these mysterious tombs. Instead, they were destroyed and construction continued. By 1923, the rate at which people were dying in the canal began to skyrocket, and it became common knowledge to stay away. The few that have been saved from jumping in say that they had no intention to take their own lives prior to walking past the canal, and that simply an invisible force pushed them to do it. Others say they looked down from the bridge to see the corpse of a woman in white floating face up just beneath the surface. But as soon as they tried to call for help, she would disappear without a trace. To this day, people are warned to never stare into the murky waters in fear that whatever evil spirits lie below will bring them down with them. Well, that's all I got for you today, friends. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what's the most haunted place you have ever visited. I'll see you next time.